Austria, formerly the Republic of Austria, is a landlocked country in Central Europe, lying in the Eastern Alps. It is a federation of 9 federal states, one of which is the capital, Vienna, the most populous city and federal state. Austria is bordered by Germany to the northwest, the Czech Republic to the north, Slovakia to the northeast, Hungary to the east, Slovenia and Italy to the south, and Switzerland and Liechtenstein to the west. The country occupies an area of 83,879 square kilometers and has a population of around 9 million. Austria emerged from the remnants of the Eastern and Hungarian March at the end of the first millennium. Originally a margraviate of Bavaria, it developed into a duchy of the Holy Roman Empire in 1156 and was later made an archduchy in 1453. In the 16th century, Vienna began serving as the empire's administrative capital, and Austria thus became the heartland of the Habsburg monarchy. Before the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire 2 years later, in 1804, Austria established its own empire, which became a great power and the dominant member of the German Confederation. The empire's defeat in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866 led to the end of the Confederation and paved the way for the establishment of Austria-Hungary a year later. Austria was the common name for the non-Hungarian parts of the state, also known as Cisleithania. After the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, Emperor Franz Joseph declared war on Serbia, which ultimately escalated into World War I. The empire's defeat and subsequent collapse led to the proclamation of the Republic of German Austria in 1918 and the First Austrian Republic in 1919. During the interwar period, anti-parliamentarian sentiments culminated in the formation of an Austro-fascist dictatorship under Engelbert Dollfuss in 1934. A year before the outbreak of World War II, Austria was annexed into Nazi Germany by Adolf Hitler, and it became a subnational division. After its liberation in 1945 and a decade of Allied occupation, the country regained its sovereignty and declared its perpetual neutrality in 1955. Austria is a semi-presidential representative democracy with a popularly elected president as head of state and a chancellor as head of government and chief executive. Major cities include Vienna, Graz, Linz, Salzburg, and Innsbruck. Austria has the 17th highest nominal GDP per capita with high standards of living. It was ranked 25th in the world for its Human Development Index in 2021. Austria has been a member of the United Nations since 1955 and of the European Union since 1995. It hosts the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and is a founding member of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and Interpol. It also signed the Schengen Agreement in 1995, and adopted the euro currency in 1999. History. Antiquity. The area that is now Austria was settled in pre-Roman times by various Celtic tribes, having been the core of the Hallstatt culture by the 6th century BC. The city of Hallstatt, in fact, has the oldest archaeological evidence of the Celts in Europe. The Celtic kingdom of Noricum that included most of modern Austria and parts of modern Slovenia was conquered by the Roman Empire in 16 BC and made a province called Noricum, which lasted until the year of 476. The regions of today's Austria which were not located within the province of Noricum were divided between the Roman provinces of Pannonia, which encompassed parts of eastern Austria, and Rhaetia, which encompassed the areas of today Vorarlberg and Tyrol. Present-day Petronell Carnuntum in eastern Austria was an important army camp turned capital city in what became known as the Pannonia Superior. Carnuntum was home for 50,000 people for nearly 400 years. Middle Ages. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the area was first invaded by the Germanic Rugii, which made this region part of their Rugiland. In 487 most of modern Austria was conquered by Odoacer, a barbarian soldier and statesman from the Middle Danube, which incorporated most of today's Austria in his Kingdom of Italy. By 493, it was conquered by the Germanic Ostrogoths, which created their own kingdom, the Ostrogothic Kingdom. Following the kingdom's fall, the area was invaded by the Alemanni, Bavarii, Slavs, and Avars. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, conquered the area in AD 788, encouraged colonization, and introduced Christianity. As part of Eastern Francia, the core areas that now encompass Austria were bequeathed to the House of Babenberg. The area was known as the Marchia Orientalis and was given to Leopold of Babenberg in 976. The first record showing the name Austria is from 996, where it is written as Ostarici, referring to the territory of the Babenberg March. In 1156, the Privilegium Minus elevated Austria to the status of a duchy. In 1192, the Babenbergs also acquired the Duchy of Styria. With the death of Frederick II in 1246, the line of the Babenbergs was extinguished. As a result, Ottokar II of Bohemia effectively assumed control of the duchies of Austria, Styria, and Carinthia. His reign came to an end with his defeat at Dernkrut at the hands of Rudolf I of Germany in 1278. Thereafter, until World War I, Austria's history was largely that of its ruling dynasty, the Habsburgs. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the Habsburgs began to accumulate other provinces in the vicinity of the Duchy of Austria. In 1438, Duke Albert V of Austria was chosen as the successor to his father-in-law, Emperor Sigismund. Although Albert himself only reigned for a year, henceforth every emperor of the Holy Roman Empire was a Habsburg, with only one exception. The Habsburgs began also to accumulate territory far from the hereditary lands. In 1477, Archduke Maximilian, only son of Emperor Frederick III, married the heiress Maria of Burgundy, thus acquiring most of the Netherlands for the family. In 1496, his son Philip the Fair married Joanna the Mad, the heiress of Castile and Aragon, thus acquiring Spain and its Italian, African, Asian, and New World appendages for the Habsburgs. In 1526, following the Battle of Mohacs, Bohemia and the part of Hungary not occupied by the Ottomans came under Austrian rule. Ottoman expansion into Hungary led to frequent conflicts between the two empires, particularly evident in the Long War of 1593 to 1606. The Turks made incursions into Styria nearly 20 times, of which some are cited as burning, pillaging, and taking thousands of slaves. In late September 1529, Suleiman the Magnificent launched the first siege of Vienna, which unsuccessfully ended, according to Ottoman historians, with the snowfalls of an early beginning winter. 17th and 18th centuries. During the long reign of Leopold I, Holy Roman Emperor, following the successful defense of Vienna against the Turks in 1683, under the command of the King of Poland John III Sobieski, the Great Turkish War resulted in most of Hungary being controlled by Austria. This arrangement was formalized in the Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699. Emperor Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor, relinquished many of the gains the empire made in the previous years. He enjoyed the imminent extinction of the House of Habsburg. Charles VI was willing to offer concrete advantages in territory and authority in exchange for recognition of the Pragmatic Sanction of 1713. Therefore, his daughter Maria Theresa was recognized as his heir. With the rise of Prussia, the Austria-Prussia rivalry began in Germany. Austria participated, together with Prussia and Russia, in the first and the third of the three partitions of Poland in 1772 and 1795 respectively. From that time, Austria became the birthplace of classical music and played host to different composers including Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Ludwig van Beethoven, and Franz Schubert. 19th century. Austria later became engaged in a war with revolutionary France, which was highly unsuccessful in the beginning, with successive defeats at the hands of Napoleon Bonaparte, meaning the end of the Old Holy Roman Empire in 1806. 2 years earlier, the Empire of Austria was founded. From 1792 to 1801, the Austrians had suffered 754,700 casualties. In 1814, Austria was part of the Allied forces that invaded France and brought to an end the Napoleonic Wars. It emerged from the Congress of Vienna in 1815 as one of the continent's four dominant powers and a recognized great power. The same year, the German Confederation was founded under the presidency of Austria. Because of unsolved social, political, and national conflicts, the German lands were shaken by the 1848 revolutions aiming to create a unified Germany. The various different possibilities for a united Germany were, a Greater Germany, or a Greater Austria, or just the German Confederation without Austria at all. As Austria was not willing to relinquish its German-speaking territories to what would become the German Empire of 1848, the crown of the newly formed empire was offered to the Prussian King Friedrich Wilhelm IV. In 1864, Austria and Prussia fought together against Denmark and secured the independence from Denmark of the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. As they could not agree on how the two duchies should be administered, though, they fought the Austro-Prussian War in 1866. Defeated by Prussia in the Battle of Königgrätz, Austria had to leave the German Confederation and no longer took part in German politics. After the defeated Hungarian Revolution of 1848, the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867, the Ausgleich, provided for a dual sovereignty, the Austrian Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary, under Franz Joseph I. The Austrian-Hungarian rule of this diverse empire included various groups, including Germans, Hungarians, Croats, Czechs, Poles, Russians, Serbs, Slovaks, Slovenes, and Ukrainians, as well as large Italian and Romanian communities. As a result, ruling Austria-Hungary became increasingly difficult in an age of emerging nationalist movements, requiring considerable reliance on an expanded secret police. Yet, the government of Austria tried its best to be accommodating in some respects. For example, the Reichsgesetzblatt, publishing the laws and ordinances of Cisleithania, was issued in 8 languages, and all national groups were entitled to schools in their own language and to the use of their mother tongue at state offices. Many Austrians of all different social circles such as George Ritter von Schoonerer promoted strong pan-Germanism in hope of reinforcing an ethnic German identity and the annexation of Austria to Germany. Some Austrians such as Karl Lueger also used pan-Germanism as a form of populism to further their own political goals. Although Bismarck's policies excluded Austria and the German Austrians from Germany, many Austrian pan-Germans idolized him and wore blue cornflowers, known to be the favorite flower of German Emperor William I, in their buttonholes, along with cockades in the German national colors, although they were both temporarily banned in Austrian schools, as a way to show discontent towards the multi-ethnic empire. Austria's exclusion from Germany caused many Austrians a problem with their national identity and prompted the Social Democratic leader Otto Bauer to state that it was the conflict between our Austrian and German character. The Austro-Hungarian Empire caused ethnic tension between the German Austrians and the other ethnic groups. Many Austrians, especially those involved with the pan-German movements, desired a reinforcement of an ethnic German identity and hoped that the empire would collapse, which would allow an annexation of Austria by Germany. A lot of Austrian pan-German nationalists protested passionately against Minister-President Casimir Count Badeni's language decree of 1897, which made German and Czech co-official languages in Bohemia and required new government officials to be fluent in both languages. This meant in practice that the civil service would almost exclusively hire Czechs, because most middle-class Czechs spoke German but not the other way around. The support of ultramontane Catholic politicians and clergy for this reform triggered the launch of the Away from Rome movement, which was initiated by supporters of Schoenerer and called on German Christians to leave the Roman Catholic Church. Early 20th century. As the Second Constitutional Era began in the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary took the opportunity to annex Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1908. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in 1914 by Bosnian Serb Gavrilo Princip was used by leading Austrian politicians and generals to persuade the emperor to declare war on Serbia, thereby risking and prompting the outbreak of World War I, which eventually led to the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Over 1 million Austro-Hungarian soldiers died in World War I. On October 21, 1918, the elected German members of the Reichsrat met in Vienna as the Provisional National Assembly for German Austria. On October 30, the Assembly founded the Republic of German Austria by appointing a government, called Staatsrat. This new government was invited by the Emperor to take part in the decision on the planned armistice with Italy, but refrained from this business. This left the responsibility for the end of the war, on November 3, 1918, solely to the Emperor and his government. On November 11, the Emperor, advised by ministers of the old and the new governments, declared he would not take part in state business anymore. On November 12, German Austria, by law, declared itself to be a democratic republic and part of the new German Republic. The Constitution, renaming the Staatsrat as Bundesregierung and Nationalversammlung as Nationalrat, was passed on November 10, 1920. The Treaty of Saint-Germain of 1919 confirmed and consolidated the new order of Central Europe, which to a great extent had been established in November 1918, creating new states and altering others. The German-speaking parts of Austria, which had been part of Austria-Hungary, were reduced to a rump state named the Republic of German Austria, though excluding the predominantly German-speaking South Tyrol. The desire for the annexation of Austria to Germany was a popular opinion shared by all social circles in both Austria and Germany. On November 12, German Austria was declared a republic, and named Social Democrat Karl Renner as provisional chancellor. On the same day it drafted a provisional constitution that stated that German Austria is a democratic republic and German Austria is an integral part of the German Reich. The Treaty of Saint-Germain and the Treaty of Versailles explicitly forbade union between Austria and Germany. The treaties also forced German Austria to rename itself as Republic of Austria, which consequently led to the First Austrian Republic. Over 3 million German-speaking Austrians found themselves living outside the new Austrian Republic as minorities in the newly formed or enlarged states of Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Hungary, and Italy. These included the provinces of South Tyrol, and German Bohemia. The status of German Bohemia and Sudetenland later played a role in World War II. The border between Austria and the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was settled with the Carinthian plebiscite in October 1920 and allocated the major part of the territory of the former Austro-Hungarian crown land of Carinthia to Austria. This set the border on the Karavank mountain range, with many Slovenes remaining in Austria. Interwar period and World War II. After the war, inflation began to devalue the krona, which was still Austria's currency. In autumn 1922, Austria was granted an international loan supervised by the League of Nations. The purpose of the loan was to avert bankruptcy, stabilize the currency, and improve Austria's general economic condition. The loan meant that Austria passed from an independent state to the control exercised by the League of Nations. In 1925, the Austrian shilling was introduced, replacing the krona at a rate of 10,000:1. Later, it was nicknamed the Alpine dollar due to its stability. From 1925 to 1929 the economy enjoyed a short high before nearly crashing after Black Tuesday. The First Austrian Republic lasted until 1933, when Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss, using what he called self-switch-off of parliament, established an autocratic regime tending towards Italian fascism. The two big parties at this time, the Social Democrats and the Conservatives, had paramilitary armies. The Social Democrats' Republikanischer Schutzbund was now declared illegal, but was still operative as the 12 to 15 February 1934 Austrian Civil War broke out. In February 1934, several members of the Schutzbund were executed, the Social Democratic Party was outlawed, and many of its members were imprisoned or emigrated. On May 1, 1934, the Austro-fascists imposed a new constitution which cemented Dollfuss's power, but on July 25 he was assassinated in an Austrian Nazi coup attempt. His successor Kurt Schuschnigg acknowledged the fact that Austria was a German state, and he also believed that Austrians were better Germans, but he wished that Austria would remain independent. He announced a referendum on March 9, 1938, to be held on March 13, concerning Austria's independence from Germany. Nazi rule. On March 12, 1938, Austrian Nazis took over the government, while German troops occupied the country, which prevented Schuschnigg's referendum from taking place. On March 13, 1938, the Anschluss of Austria was officially declared. 2 days later, Austrian-born Adolf Hitler announced what he called the reunification of his home country with the rest of the German Reich on Vienna's Heldenplatz. He established a referendum which confirmed the union with Germany in April 1938. Parliamentary elections were held in Germany, including recently annexed Austria, on April 10, 1938. They were the final elections to the Reichstag during Nazi rule, and they took the form of a single-question referendum asking whether voters approved of a single Nazi party list for the 813-member Reichstag, as well as the recent annexation of Austria. Jews, Roma, and Sinti were not allowed to vote. Turnout in the election was officially 99.5%, with 98.9% voting yes. In the case of Austria, Adolf Hitler's native soil, 99.71% of an electorate of 4,484,475 officially went to the ballots, with a positive tally of 99.73%. Although most Austrians favored the Anschluss, in certain parts of Austria, the German soldiers were not always welcomed with flowers and joy, especially in Vienna, which had Austria's largest Jewish population. Nevertheless, despite the propaganda and the manipulation and rigging which surrounded the ballot box result, there was massive genuine support for Hitler for fulfilling the Anschluss, since many Germans from both Austria and Germany saw it as completing the long overdue unification of all Germans into one state. On March 13, 1938, Austria was annexed by the Third Reich and ceased to exist as an independent country. The Aryanization of the wealth of Jewish Austrians started immediately in mid-March, with the so-called wild phase, but it was soon structured legally and bureaucratically so the assets which Jewish citizens possessed could be stripped from them. At that time, Adolf Eichmann, who grew up in Austria, was transferred to Vienna and ordered to persecute the Jews. During the November pogrom in 1938, Jews and Jewish institutions such as synagogues were subjected to violent attacks in Vienna, Klagenfurt, Linz, Graz, Salzburg, Innsbruck, and several cities in Lower Austria. Otto von Habsburg, a vehement opponent of the Nazis, the last crown prince of Austria-Hungary, an honorary citizen of hundreds of places in Austria and partly envisaged by Schuschnigg as a monarchical option, was in Belgium at the time. He spoke out against the Anschluss and was then wanted by the Nazi regime, and his property would have been expropriated and he would have been shot immediately if he were caught. In 1938, the Nazis renamed Austria the Ostmark, a name which it had until 1942, when it was renamed the Alpine and Danubian Gaue. Though Austrians made up only 8% of the population of the Third Reich, some of the most prominent Nazis were native Austrians, including Adolf Hitler, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, Arthur Seyss-Inquart, Franz Stangl, Alois Brunner, Friedrich Rainer, and Odilo Globoknik, as were over 13% of the members of the SS and 40% of the staff at the Nazi extermination camps. In the Reichsgau, besides the main camp Kazimauthausen, there were numerous subcamps in all provinces where Jews and other prisoners were killed, tortured, and exploited. At this time, because the territory was outside the operational radius of Allied aircraft, the armaments industry was greatly expanded through the forced labor of concentration camp prisoners. This was especially the case with regard to the manufacture of fighter planes, tanks, and missiles. Most of the resistance groups were soon crushed by the Gestapo. While the plans of the group around Karl Burian to blow up the Gestapo's headquarters in Vienna were uncovered, the important group around the later executed priest Heinrich Mayer managed to contact the Allies. This so-called Mayer-Messner group was able to send the Allies information about armaments factories where V-1 flying bombs, V-2 rockets, Tiger tanks, and aircraft were manufactured, information which was important to the success of Operation Crossbow and Operation Hydra, both of which were preliminary missions before the launch of Operation Overlord. This resistance group, which was in contact with the American Secret Service, soon provided information about mass executions and concentration camps such as Auschwitz. The group's aim was to cause Nazi Germany to lose the war as quickly as possible and re-establish an independent Austria. Allied occupation. Vienna fell on April 13, 1945, during the Soviet Vienna offensive, just before the total collapse of the Third Reich. The invading Allied powers, in particular the Americans, planned for the supposed Alpine fortress operation of a national redoubt, that was largely to have taken place on Austrian soil in the mountains of the Eastern Alps. However, it never materialized because of the rapid collapse of the Reich. Karl Renner and Adolf Scharf, Leopold Kunstschuk, and Johann Kolenik declared Austria's secession from the Third Reich by the Declaration of Independence on April 27, 1945, and set up a provisional government in Vienna under State Chancellor Renner the same day, with the approval of the victorious Red Army and backed by Joseph Stalin. At the end of April, most of western and southern Austria were still under Nazi rule. On May 1, 1945, the Federal Constitutional Law of 1920, which had been terminated by dictator Dollfuss on May 1, 1934, was declared valid again. The total number of Austrian military deaths from 1939 to 1945 was 260,000. The total number of Jewish Austrian Holocaust victims was 65,000. About 140,000 Jewish Austrians had fled from the country in 1938 to 39. Thousands of Austrians had taken part in serious Nazi crimes, a fact which was officially acknowledged by Chancellor Franz Vranitzky in 1992. Allied-occupied Austria was after World War II divided into military occupation zones. Austria was governed by the Allied Commission for Austria. As stipulated in the Moscow Declaration of 1943, a subtle difference was seen in the treatment of Austria by the Allies. The Austrian government, consisting of Social Democrats, Conservatives, and Communists, resided in Vienna, which was surrounded by the Soviet zone. This Austrian government was recognized by the Allies of World War II in October 1945, despite concerns that Karl Renner could be Stalin's puppet. On July 26, 1946, the Austrian parliament passed its first nationalization law, and approximately 70 mining and manufacturing companies were seized by the Austrian state. The Ministry of Property Protection and Economic Planning was responsible for directing the nationalized industries under the directorship of Minister Peter Croyland. Independence. On May 15, 1955, after talks which lasted for years and were influenced by the Cold War, Austria regained full independence by concluding the Austrian State Treaty with the Allies of World War II. On October 26, 1955, all occupation troops had left and Austria declared its permanent neutrality by an act of parliament. This day is now Austria's national day, a public holiday. The status of Tyrol is a lingering problem between Austria and Italy. To this day, there are 20 different squares in Austrian cities called Südtiroler Platz in memory of the supposed loss of the Austrian territories. Riots by the South Tyrolean independence movement have been documented in the 1950s and 1960s. A great degree of autonomy was granted to Tyrol by the Italian national government. The political system of the Second Republic is based on the Constitution of 1920 and 1929, which was reintroduced in 1945. The system came to be characterized by proports, whereby most posts of political importance were split proportionately between members of the Social Democratic Party of Austria and the Austrian People's Party. Interest group chambers with mandatory membership grew to considerable importance and were usually consulted in the legislative process, so hardly any legislation was passed that did not reflect widespread consensus. Since 1945, governing via a single-party government has occurred twice. During all other legislative periods, either a grand coalition of SPO and OVP or a small coalition ruled the country. Kurt Waldheim, the former Secretary-General of the United Nations, was elected President of Austria from 1986 to 1992. He had been a Wehrmacht officer in the Second World War and was accused of war crimes. Following a referendum in 1994, at which consent reached a majority of 2/3, the country became a member of the European Union on January 1, 1995. The major parties SPO and OVP have contrary opinions about the future status of Austria's military non-alignment. While the SPO in public supports a neutral role, the OVP argues for stronger integration into the EU's security policy. Even a future NATO membership is not ruled out by some OVP politicians. In reality, Austria is taking part in the EU's common foreign and security policy, participates in peacekeeping and peace-creating tasks, and has become a member of NATO's Partnership for Peace. The constitution has been amended accordingly. Since Liechtenstein joined the Schengen area in 2011, none of Austria's neighboring countries performs border controls towards it anymore. Government and politics. The Parliament of Austria is located in Vienna, the country's capital and most populous city. Austria became a federal, representative democratic republic through the Federal Constitutional Law of 1920. The political system of the Second Republic with its 9 federal states is based on the Constitution of 1920, amended in 1929, which was reenacted on May 1, 1945. The President of Austria is the head of state. The President is directly elected by popular majority vote, with a runoff between the top-scoring candidates if necessary. The Chancellor of Austria is head of the government. The Chancellor is selected by the President and tasked with forming a government based on the partisan composition of the lower house of Parliament. The government can be removed from office by either a presidential decree or by vote of no confidence in the lower chamber of Parliament, the Nationalrat. Voting for the President and for the Parliament used to be compulsory in Austria. The compulsion was abolished in steps from 1982 to 2004. Austria's parliament consists of two chambers. The composition of the Nationalrat is determined every 5 years or whenever the Nationalrat has been dissolved by the federal president on a motion by the federal chancellor, or by Nationalrat itself by a general election in which every citizen over the age of 16 has the right to vote. The voting age was lowered from 18 in 2007. While there is a general threshold of 4% of the vote for all parties in federal elections to participate in the proportional allocation of seats, there remains the possibility of being elected to a seat directly in one of the 43 regional electoral districts. The Nationalrat is the dominant chamber in the legislative process in Austria. However, the upper house of parliament, the Bundesrat, has a limited right of veto. A constitutional convention, called the Osterreich-Konvent, was convened on June 30, 2003 to consider reforms to the constitution, but failed to produce a proposal that would command a two-thirds majority in the Nationalrat, the margin necessary for constitutional amendments or reform. While the bicameral parliament and the government constitute the legislative and executive branches, respectively, the courts are the third branch of Austrian state powers. The Constitutional Court exerts considerable influence on the political system because of its power to invalidate legislation and ordinances that are not in compliance with the Constitution. Since 1995, the European Court of Justice may overrule Austrian decisions in all matters defined in laws of the European Union. Austria also implements the decisions of the European Court of Human Rights, since the European Convention on Human Rights is part of the Austrian Constitution. Since 2006. After general elections held in October 2006, the Social Democratic Party emerged as the strongest party, and the Austrian People's Party came in second, having lost about 8% of its previous polling. Political realities prohibited any of the two major parties from forming a coalition with smaller parties. In January 2007, the People's Party and SPO formed a grand coalition with the Social Democrat Alfred Gassenbauer as chancellor. This coalition broke up in June 2008. Elections in September 2008 further weakened both major parties, but together they still held 70% of the votes, with the Social Democrats holding slightly more than the other party. They formed a coalition with Werner Faymann from the Social Democrats as chancellor. The Green Party came in third with 11% of the vote. The FPO and the deceased Jörg Haider's new party Alliance for the Future of Austria, both on the political right, were strengthened during the election but taken together received less than 20% of the vote. On October 11, 2008, Jörg Haider died in a car accident. In the legislative elections of 2013, the Social Democratic Party received 27% of the vote and 52 seats, People's Party 24% and 47 seats, thus controlling together the majority of the seats. The Freedom Party received 40 seats and 21% of the votes, while the Greens received 12% and 24 seats. Two new parties, Stronach and the NEOS, received less than 10% of the vote, and 11 and 9 seats respectively. On May 17, 2016, Christian Kern from Social Democrats was sworn in as new chancellor. He continued governing in a grand coalition with the Conservative People's Party. He took the office after former chancellor, also from SPO, Werner Faymann's resignation. On January 26, 2017, Alexander van der Bellen was sworn in as the mostly ceremonial, but symbolically significant, role of Austrian president. After the Grand Coalition broke in spring 2017, a snap election was proclaimed for October 2017. The Austrian People's Party with its new young leader Sebastian Kurz emerged as the largest party in the National Council, winning 31.5% of votes and 62 of the 183 seats. The Social Democratic Party finished second with 52 seats and 26.9% votes, slightly ahead of the Freedom Party of Austria, which received 51 seats and 26%. NEOS finished fourth with 10 seats, and PILZ, which split from the Green Party at the start of the campaign, entered parliament for the first time and came in fifth place with 8 seats and 4.4%. The Green Party failed with 3.8% to cross the 4% threshold and was ejected from parliament, losing all of its 24 seats. The OVP decided to form a coalition with the FPÖ. The new government between the center-right wing and the right-wing populist party under the new Chancellor Sebastian Kurz was sworn in on December 18, 2017, but the coalition government later collapsed in the wake of the Ibiza corruption scandal and new elections were called for September 29, 2019. The elections lead to another landslide victory of the Austrian People's Party, who formed a coalition government with the reinvigorated Greens, which was sworn in with Kurz as Chancellor on January 7, 2020. On October 11, 2021, Chancellor Sebastian Kurz resigned, after pressure triggered by a corruption scandal. Foreign Minister Alexander Schallenberg of OVP succeeded him as Chancellor. Following a corruption scandal involving the ruling People's Party, Austria got its third conservative chancellor in 2 months after Karl Nehammer was sworn into office on December 6, 2021. His predecessor Alexander Schallenberg had left the office after less than 2 months. OVP and the Greens continued to govern together. A year after Karl Nehammer was sworn into office, Austria disagreed to Bulgaria's and Romania's accession to the Schengen area. In the two countries, the Austrian veto caused a considerable outrage. Because of the controversial vote, Romania withdrew its ambassador from Vienna. Citizens of Romania were advised by the government not to travel to Austria for skiing, and a boycott against Austrian companies like OMV and Raiffeisen is still ongoing. Foreign relations. The 1955 Austrian State Treaty ended the occupation of Austria following World War II and recognized Austria as an independent and sovereign state. On October 26, 1955, the Federal Assembly passed a constitutional article in which Austria declares of her own free will her perpetual neutrality. The second section of this law stated that in all future times Austria will not join any military alliances and will not permit the establishment of any foreign military bases on her territory. Since then, Austria has shaped its foreign policy on the basis of neutrality, but rather different from the neutrality of Switzerland. Austria began to reassess its definition of neutrality following the fall of the Soviet Union, granting overflight rights for the unsanctioned action against Iraq in 1991, and since 1995, it has developed participation in the EU's common foreign and security policy. Also in 1995, it joined NATO's Partnership for Peace and subsequently participated in peacekeeping missions in Bosnia. Meanwhile, the only part of the constitutional law on neutrality of 1955 still fully valid is not to allow foreign military bases in Austria. Austria signed the UN's nuclear weapon ban treaty, which was opposed by all NATO members. Austria attaches great importance to participation in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and other international economic organizations, and it has played an active role in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. As an OSCE participating state, Austria's international commitments are subject to monitoring under the mandate of the U.S. Helsinki Commission. Military. The manpower of the Austrian armed forces mainly relies on conscription. All males who have reached the age of 18 and are found fit have to serve a 6 months compulsory military service, followed by an 8-year reserve obligation. Both males and females at the age of 16 are eligible for voluntary service. Conscientious objection is legally acceptable, and those who claim this right are obliged to serve an institutionalized 9-month civilian service instead. Since 1998, women volunteers have been allowed to become professional soldiers. The main sectors of the Bundesheer are joint forces, which consist of land forces, air forces, international missions, and special forces, next to Joint Mission Support Command and Joint Command Support Center. Austria is a landlocked country and has no navy. In 2012, Austria's defense expenditures corresponded to approximately 0.8% of its GDP. The army currently has about 26,000 soldiers, of whom about 12,000 are conscripts. As head of state, the Austrian president is nominally the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Command of the Austrian armed forces is exercised by the Minister of Defense, as of May 2020, Claudia Tanner. Since the end of the Cold War, and more importantly the removal of the former heavily guarded Iron Curtain separating Austria and its Eastern Bloc neighbors, the Austrian military has been assisting Austrian border guards in trying to prevent border crossings by illegal immigrants. This assistance came to an end when Hungary and Slovakia joined the EU Schengen area in 2008, for all intents and purposes abolishing internal border controls between treaty states. Some politicians have called for a prolongation of this mission, but the legality of this is heavily disputed. In accordance with the Austrian constitution, armed forces may only be deployed in a limited number of cases, mainly to defend the country and aid in cases of national emergency, such as in the wake of natural disasters. They may only exceptionally be used as auxiliary police forces. Within its self-declared status of permanent neutrality, Austria has a tradition of engaging in unled peacekeeping and other humanitarian missions. The Austrian Forces Disaster Relief Unit, in particular, an all-volunteer unit with close ties to civilian specialists, enjoys a reputation as a quick and efficient SAR unit. Currently, larger contingents of Austrian forces are deployed in Bosnia and Kosovo. Economy. Austria consistently ranks high in terms of GDP per capita, due to its highly industrialized economy, and well-developed social market economy. Until the 1980s, many of Austria's largest industry firms were nationalized. In recent years, however, privatization has reduced state holdings to a level comparable to other European economies. Labor movements are particularly influential, exercising large influence on labor politics and decisions related to the expansion of the economy. Next to a highly developed industry, international tourism is the most important part of the economy of Austria. Germany has historically been the main trading partner of Austria, making it vulnerable to rapid changes in the German economy. Since Austria became a member state of the European Union, it has gained closer ties to other EU economies. Membership of the EU has drawn an influx of foreign investors attracted by Austria's access to the single European market and proximity to the aspiring economies of the European Union. Growth in GDP reached 3.3% in 2006. At least 67% of Austria's imports come from other European Union member states. The financial crisis of 2007 to 2008 dented the economy of Austria in other ways as well. It caused, for example, the Hypo Alp Adria Bank International to be purchased in December 2009 by the government for €1 owing to credit difficulties. As of February 2014, The HGAA situation was unresolved, causing Chancellor Werner Faymann to warn that its failure would be comparable to the 1931 Kreditanstalt event. Austria indicated on November 16, 2010 that it would withhold the December installment of its contribution to the EU bailout of Greece, citing the material worsening of the Greek debt situation and the apparent inability of Greece to collect the level of tax receipts it had previously promised. Since the fall of communism, Austrian companies have been quite active players and consolidators in Eastern Europe. Between 1995 and 2010, 4,868 mergers and acquisitions with a total known value of 163 billion euros with the involvement of Austrian firms have been announced. The largest transactions with involvement of Austrian companies have been the acquisition of Bank Austria by Hypovereinsbank for 7.8 billion euros in 2000, the acquisition of Porsche Holding Salzburg by Volkswagen Group for 3.6 billion euros in 2009, and the acquisition of Banca Comerciale Romana by Erste Group for 3.7 billion euros in 2005. Tourism in Austria accounts for almost 9% of its gross domestic product. In 2007, Austria ranked 9th worldwide in international tourism receipts, with 18.9 billion US. In international tourist arrivals, Austria ranked 12th with 20.8 million tourists. Language. The official language of current Austrian state has been German since 1920, based on Article 8 of its constitution the same year. Austrian German or Austrian is usually written in Austria and Italian South Tyrol. It has been standardized in Austria since the Ministry of Education, Science, and Research published the Österreichisches Wörterbuch in 1951, though used primarily just in education, publications, announcements, and websites. However, the de facto common spoken languages of Austria are not Austrian German taught in schools but Bavarian and Alemannic dialects, two Upper German local languages or collection of dialects with varying degrees of difficulty being understood by each other as well as by speakers of non-Austrian German dialects. Taken as a collective whole, German languages, or dialects are thus spoken natively by 88.6% of the population, which includes the 2.5% German-born citizens who reside in Austria, followed by Turkish, Serbian, Croatian, English, Hungarian, Bosnian, Polish, Albanian, Slovenian, Czech, Arabic, and Romanian. The Austrian federal states Carinthia and Styria are home to a significant indigenous Slovene-speaking minority, while in the easternmost federal state, Burgenland, there are significant Hungarian and Croatian-speaking minorities. Burgenland Croatian, Hungarian, and Slovene are also recognized as official languages beside German in parts of Carinthia and Burgenland. Religion. Austria was historically a strongly Roman Catholic country as the center of the Habsburg monarchy, which championed Roman Catholicism. Although in the 16th century many Austrians converted to other denominations as the Protestant Reformation spread across Europe, the Habsburgs enacted measures of counter-reformation as early as 1527 and harshly repressed Austrian evangelicalism. Only a minority of Austrians remained Protestant. At least since the 1970s, a few decades after the fall of the Habsburg monarchy and the transformation of Austria into a federal republic, there has been a continuous decline of Christianity with the exception of Orthodox churches and a proliferation of other religions, a process which has been particularly pronounced in Vienna, with its large foreign and immigrant populations. In 2001, about 74% of Austria's population were registered as Roman Catholic, while about 5% considered themselves Protestants. Austrian Christians, both Roman Catholic and Protestant, are obliged to pay a mandatory membership fee to their churches. This payment is called the Kirchenbeitrag. From the second half of the 20th century, the number of adherents and churchgoers has declined. Data for 2018 from the Austrian Roman Catholic Church list 5,050,000 members, or 57% of the total Austrian population, yet Sunday church attendance was only 605,828, or 7% of the total Austrian population in 2015. Additionally, the Lutheran Church recorded a loss of 74,421 adherents between 2001 and 2016. The 2001 census reported that about 12% of the population declared themselves without a religion. According to ecclesiastical information, this share had grown to 20% by 2015 and further increased to 23% in 2021. Of the remaining population, around 340,000 were registered as members of various Muslim communities in 2001, originating chiefly from Turkey, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Kosovo. The number of Muslims doubled in the 15 years to 2016 to 700,000 and reached 745,600 in 2021. In 2021, another 436,700 residents of Austria were members of Eastern Orthodox churches, 26,600 were Buddhists, 10,100 were Hindus, about 21,800 were active Jehovah's Witnesses, and 5,400 were Jews.